I don't know for sure whether TikTok is going to be sold. I don't know for sure that we'll be the successful bidder if it is. We met early on with the top influencers on TikTok and top creators, 20 of them. They're frustrated with TikTok because they're subject to a black box. They're very excited about a TikTok platform where they can build community, not just create content. What can be created there with different algorithms which respect the individuals, I think will be fantastic.
I'm Bob Safian, and I'm here with Frank McCourt, Executive Chairman of McCourt Global, founder of the nonprofit Project Liberty, owner of Francis Marseille Football Club. Frank, thanks for joining us. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, Bob. It's nice to be with you.
So what I want to talk to you about to start today is TikTok. Next week, a U.S. appeals court is slated to hear arguments on a law that would ban TikTok here in the U.S., and there's fear that TikTok enables the Chinese government to spread propaganda and essentially spy on U.S. citizens. You've stepped up to say you'd buy TikTok, even without the algorithm that's driven its success. But before we get into that, do you think TikTok in its current form poses a national security risk?
Yeah, absolutely it does. And, I have the privilege of seeing most of the briefing that was shared with Congress before the legislation was quickly passed. And look, Bob, I've been working on this for over 10 years, and I didn't think I could be more alarmed, and I was when I saw that briefing. It's massive surveillance technology, and our own American platforms are essentially doing the same thing. The difference here, of course, is that this is a Chinese platform controlled by a government that is, not pro-democracy, and we now know that there's a vast majority of young people are getting their news, not just being entertained by, but getting their news on TikTok. And this is the greatest piece of propaganda machinery ever built. And when you see how sophisticated it is in dialing up things that the Chinese government would like young people to believe, and dial down things that they don't want them to believe, it's quite alarming, actually. So there's no doubt in my mind that it's a national security threat. I think the more core issue, however, is, do we really want to live in a world where, this awesome internet technology, and it is awesome and wonderful and can do great things, is designed in such a way that it's surveilling us, scraping our data? Do we really want to be manipulated by a few companies? I for one, do not. I think it's just, it's crazy. We've gotten to this point, but here we are, and it's beyond time that we address it.
The facts, as you describe them, of the case against TikTok, it makes it sound like the legal case is sort of like a no-brainer, like it'll be a slam dunk. How closely are you watching this legal case? Like, there is still doubt about it.
Yeah, we're watching it very closely. The case is about the legislation that was passed, and ByteDance is making a First Amendment argument, right? An argument around free speech. And by the way, we've heard this from all the big tech platforms. They hide behind this free speech veil, and free speech does not give you the right to surveil people and steal their data and manipulate them. We think the government will prevail on this lawsuit, but there's another part of this whole TikTok saga, and that is a ruling that is non-appealable, that gives the current administration the power to shut down TikTok or force it to divest right now. The legislation was just really belt and suspender. When all of our national security agencies come forward with findings that anything, in this case TikTok, is a national security threat, there is an ability to force the company to divest the asset or to shut it down. And that's the case here with TikTok. So the legislation is a bit of a sideshow, nice to have, but not necessary. But nonetheless, we're watching it closely because I think this is the biggest issue of our age. And not just TikTok, but the fact that we're now become slaves to this technology rather than be masters of it.
Your background is in real estate development. You own the LA Dodgers, renovated Dodger Stadium, very tangible assets. And then, several years back, you began to focus more on the digital world, launched Project Liberty as a way to impact digital governance. What prompted this focus in digital and in the internet as it's evolved?
Really at the core, Bob, I'm a builder, right? My family's been building. Now it's very large scale infrastructure, but it started very modestly when my great grandfather started building roads, when Henry Ford started building cars. But we've been at it for over 130 years, designing and building infrastructure. And the internet is a piece of infrastructure, right? And we have an engineering problem here. And engineering problems can be fixed. I was able to see a bit during my LA days how social media was actually becoming weaponized. And after selling the Dodgers, I thought that, the way forward here, vis-a-vis big tech, would be to get the policymaking apparatus out in front of this set of problems. And I helped start a new public policy school in Washington, D.C. with Georgetown University, but learned very quickly and sadly that policymaking apparatus and policymakers were no match for big tech in terms of either the power, speed, agility, influence, etc., that they had. It was after that finding that I shifted my focus to the engineering aspect of this, to the infrastructure, and said, hey, how can you go about fixing the internet so that it works in a way that was originally intended, right? It was intended as a decentralized piece of technology to connect us all, to make us smarter, to advance civilization. And it was basically co-opted and colonized by a few companies that took control of this data, centralized it. And in my view, and the view of many, many others who've joined Project Liberty, is that this is wrong. Our data is our personhood in the digital age. We should own our personhood. You should own your virtual you. I should own my virtual me. So we need to fix this.
The solution is you want to acquire TikTok to make TikTok the basis for that?
I mentioned that I shifted my focus and assembled a team of really brilliant technologists, software coders, to grapple with this problem. And they came forward with what I thought was a brilliant insight. And that is, if a core internet protocol, open source, was created and then adopted at scale, the power dynamic would be flipped, and we each as individuals would decide who gets to use our data and which portions of it for what purpose. It would be a permission-based internet where our data is, of course, shared. There is value in big data. We want to get smarter. We want to get the value of all this, but do it on a permission basis. So rather than a third party surveilling you and I, scraping our data, why not you and I permission the use of our data to trusted use cases, applications and so forth.
And I guess get compensated for it.
And maybe even get compensated if there's value. So we went to work on that. It's called Project Liberty. We've built the tech. We have over 1 million people now using DSNP. And when this TikTok opportunity came along, we just thought it was a gift from heaven, right? This was a fantastic opportunity to migrate 170 million people to this alternative internet, because 1 million people is not the scale necessary to have an alternative internet. 171 million people are. So TikTok was not originally in the plan. TikTok opportunity presented itself. And so that's why in May, on behalf of Project Liberty, I announced that we were going to make the people's bid for TikTok. And our goal is to speed up the creation of this alternative and really start regaining control of our digital lives.
And so I would, as a TikTok user, I would access the internet through whatever you rename TikTok, and that would protect my identity when I was everywhere else. But TikTok itself wouldn't perform the same kind of function it does for people who are users of TikTok now?
It would actually be very similar from a user experience perspective. There will be algorithms involved. There may even be advertising involved, but all done with transparency, all done with agency and permission, all done with value being shared with the users who are actually creating the data and the content and so forth. So it's a user experience will be very similar.
If you acquired TikTok without its algorithm that ByteDance owns, you get access to all these millions of users, but wouldn't it be kind of a hollowed out version of the experience for those users?
No, as I said earlier, there will be algorithms, and there'll probably be multiple algorithms, and people will be able to curate how they interact with TikTok.
But not the same algorithms as have driven TikTok's success to this point.
Yeah, and so we met early on with the top influencers on TikTok and top creators, 20 of them, who touch over 100 million of the 170 million people. We had a dinner with them in Malibu, California. I was very curious to hear from them about how they were reacting to our bid. And it was very interesting because they were very excited about it because they're frustrated with TikTok because they're building community, but they don't know who it is. They have no visibility. And they know when suddenly they put a piece of content out and there's a big reaction to it, but they don't know why when they put another piece of content out, there's no reaction to it. They're subject to a black box. So they're very excited about a TikTok platform where they can build community, not just create content. There's a saying, Bob, in technology, which is that big data, small algorithm will beat big algorithm, small data any day. So the 170 million users, what can be created there with different algorithms which respect the individuals, I think will be fantastic.
Do you use TikTok personally? Are there social media that you do use more or less?
From day one, I felt this was a lousy deal. Give up all my data, all my information for what? A free app. So I have abstained from social media from day one.
People who might wonder, like, can you really understand the social media platform and what it is if you haven't used it yourself? If you're not as personally familiar with it.
I think it's a really definitely a valid question and concern for sure. But if hardcore, social media users or technologists or computer scientists were going to fix this problem, wouldn't they have done it by now? Am I telling you something here in this conversation that you're not aware of, that you don't know? And so for me, I think there's a benefit actually of having perspective here. If these CEOs of these tech companies were going to change, I think we would have seen that change by now. If our elected officials were going to get ahead of this problem, I think we would have seen that occur by now. This is a way, way, way bigger than just a conversation about algorithms or protocols. This is a conversation about how do we want this awesome, powerful technology to be used to make people's lives better. This is a crisis, and we need to start treating it like that and not be, fooled by these arguments that, everything's fine. This is just a First Amendment issue and this and that. I mean, really? Mark Zuckerberg is now a victim? He's a victim of the Biden administration's pressure? That's where we're at here? How many more pieces of testimony do we need to hear? How many more whistleblowers do we need to hear? What kind of constantly being deflected over to the margins by people who don't want us to go deal with the issue at its core?
It sounds like TikTok presented itself as a potential way to accelerate this movement, this change that you want to see. If you can't acquire TikTok, like, are you already looking for another vehicle to accelerate things, or is this sort of, there's something special that, like, we either works for TikTok or we go back to sort of the more basic blocking and tackling that we were doing, prior to May?
Yeah, well, we continue to do the blocking and tackling, and we're betting that ultimately TikTok will not be shut down and it will be sold. I'm talking about US TikTok. We might be wrong, but that's what we're betting on. There's a lot of investors in TikTok that would like to see some value, derived from TikTok US and not have it shut down. There's 170 million Americans that enjoy using it. We want to see it continue as well. Now, at the same time, I don't know for sure, whether TikTok is going to be sold. I don't know for sure that we'll be the successful bidder if it is. So we continue to do the work that needs to be done to go ahead and create this alternative internet. And I've committed $500 million to help seed the effort to make it happen because I'm concerned. I'm concerned about our business that's been going on for 131 years, which I don't think will survive if democracy fails. And I have 7 children, 4 grown boys, and they who are kind of pre the big harms of social media, but I have 3 young ones who now are approaching this. And this is a really serious thing. Once you see a problem, you can't unsee it. And I think we're doing good work. And by the way, someone doing better work than us, we're going to embrace that work. This isn't about being right. This is about getting it right. And then we'll get back to, our core businesses.
We've talked a lot about tech and how the tech business is and is changing. I'm curious a little bit about your perspective on the sports business. The valuation of franchises going up, women's sports having a moment, the size of TV deals, rights deals like soaring. Do you have a vision for where we are this moment in the sports business and where it's moving in culture?
I do have some perspective on that. One trend, which is media rights having, kind of exploded. And that's what drives the value of these leagues and these teams and so on and so forth. And then at the same time, we see massive cord cutting going on. And so the media platforms that were cable TV dependent, they're evaporating. So you have some sports that are hit more by that than others. It's unclear how it's going to play out, but there definitely will be winners and losers. Then you also have a massive shift in how college athletics is playing out. And now we're seeing college athletes getting paid. And that's very unclear how all that's going to work itself out because of the idea of higher education in educating the next generation of young people and creating leaders for the future and so forth is a different mission than, paying the most
running
money.
A sports business.
Exactly. So how's that going to work out? And how's that going to change the whole landscape? When the money starts infiltrating an academic environment, I think there's going to be fallout there. And then, and the last thing, and I'll put this is a bit of a plug, so I will qualify it for your listeners, but I do believe that football, soccer, what's called European football, is the sport of the future.
This is why you invested in a European football team, a soccer team, rather than trying for an NFL team?
Yeah, that's correct. I was actually not, that anxious to buy another club because they're very emotionally draining. If you put everything into it, if you're a fan yourself and you really, it's a lot. And it 8 or 9 years for me it's such a privilege with the Dodgers. The thought of owning a professional team, never mind one of the Dodgers stature, was kind of like every boy's dream come true, right? But it wasn't until I was asked to take the reins at Marseille that I really, really perked up because it is a global sport. It was kind of one of those once in a lifetime opportunities. So I decided to do it, and it's just been eye opening, and it's fun, nerve-wracking, but a privilege.
This has been great, Frank, and thanks so much for doing it. It's really great to chat with you.
I appreciate you taking the time to do this.